If the gentleman from California is ready, I will recognize him.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At this point, there's really no room for reasonable debate that the extreme and extended lockdown and school closure policies were a historic mistake. And in light of this, you see two basic tactics for those who are responsible for these policies. The first is to say, well, we just didn't know at the time. So here's a quote from perhaps the individual who did the most damage during COVID of anyone in the country, if not the world, and that's the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, who recently said on Meet the Press, "I think we would have done everything differently. I think all of us, in terms of our collective wisdom, we've evolved. We didn't know what we didn't know. We're experts in hindsight." So, Dr. Ladapo, you're the Surgeon General of Florida. My question for you is, how did you and the governor of Florida manage to time travel into the future and gain access to knowledge and wisdom that is only available to the likes of the governor of California in retrospect?
Right. Thank you for your question. What was different with the policies that the governor enthusiastically endorsed and frankly had company in every state just about, with the exception of a few, including Governor DeSantis, was that those were actually not classic public health principles. These are published studies and published papers about how to approach pandemics and public health crises. And one of those principles is to, as much as possible, help people maintain their normal routines. Old published papers state very clearly that the benefits, if any, of things like forcing people to stay home are unlikely to be realized. This is not new knowledge. This is old stuff, but unfortunately, none of it was followed when the COVID-19 pandemic started.
Well, thank you for your common sense and science-based policies. Millions of people, particularly kids in Florida, are much better off because of it. Now, the first tactic is to simply say, well, we didn't know at the time. The second tactic is simply to deny that these events occurred altogether. We've seen that actually in the testimony of several Biden administration officials in this Congress. You had the Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, despite being an enthusiastic advocate for child vaccine mandates, denied in testimony before the Education Committee that he had supported that. You had the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Javier Becerra, from my own state of California, testify, quote, "We never forced anyone to do anything, even though he oversaw the heinous 2-year-old mask mandate for Head Start." And perhaps most incredibly, you had Douglas Parker, the head of OSHA, also from California, who was responsible for the Biden administration's attempt to institute a vaccine mandate on 70 million Americans, who flatly denied in testimony before our committee that that had occurred. So it's this attempt, sort of like the memory hole that they have in 1984, to simply pretend that these events never occurred, that it was all a bad dream. So, Ms. Dillon, you lived through what I lived through in California. You fought back as valiantly as anyone in our state against these abuses. For the sake of sort of preserving our historic memory of what life actually was like in California during this period, could you just give us a few snapshots of sort of some of the worst abuses that we all had to endure?
Well, thank you, Congressman Kiley. And by the way, you were also a fellow warrior in that battle and went to court to challenge our governor. I appreciate that as a fellow lawyer. To me, the absurdity that certain people could cross county lines during the pandemic, but our governor forbade the rest of us from crossing county lines unless we had an essential purpose is one of those crazy issues. The fact that you needed a vaccine passport to eat in restaurants well into the pandemic, when in fact Governor Newsom with glee ate in the French Laundry restaurant that was cut off from the rest of us. The fact that Governor Newsom and other wealthy California elites were able to educate their own children in their backyards in pods and relegated the most vulnerable members of our society, inner city children, children for whom English is a second language in Los Angeles County, to destroyed careers in education, to a lifetime of less earning and less liberty, really, is an outrage. And everyone just simply wants to say, whoa, well, mistakes were made, we did the best we could at the same time. In fact, there were different rules for the elites in California and different rules for the rest of us. And the fact that judges pointed to Jacobson and said, Ms. Dillon, we're not talking about deferential or rational basis scrutiny. No scrutiny is due to the government's action in shutting us down. And so my fear as a civil rights lawyer is that with the snap of a finger or the stroke of a pen, the very same civil liberties catastrophe could happen to us again unless Congress takes action to right that wrong.
Thank you. I yield back.